I was brought up where civic society was the highest calling in life. Our father says to us, be civil servants. The civil sector needs you. In the past 30 years, I haven't sensed that. In the past 30 years, I haven't heard a parent tell their child, join civic society. I just haven't heard it because we're telling our children to be business people, be entrepreneurs, be very successful, get rich. And then maybe if you get rich soon enough, then you can start being a philanthropist. You can start being charitable. And so for the beginning of your life, it'll be somewhat meaningless. And the end of your life, there'll be redemption, so to speak, and it'll be meaningful. And I hear these conversations all the time. I was at a meeting with all the European leaders, and they talked about people who were philanthropists and charitable. They talked about the entrepreneurs and the executives. They never talked about the civil servants. And I said, what's going on? Civic society is very important, so thank you for having this. When I talk about myself, I'm not a futurist. I'm not somebody who's going to tell you what the future will be, but I have been there. I've been to the future many times. Now, what does that mean? I feel I've been to the future, and when somebody says something to me now that I'm 72, that's a lot of years behind me, over 50 years on the faculty, I say, yeah, it will, of course it will, and maybe I'll be there, maybe I won't, but you will. So the future is what we make it, but it's not just predicted. The reason I show you this slide, which is sort of meaningless, hard to read, this is a computer display system in the 1960s at MIT when I was a student. So this image comes from 1964. And it's an image of cars being called from one point, which is one end of any of those lines, to another point to pick up passengers on demand to take them to wherever they want to go. 1964. Uber today, there's nothing new on that part of it. But when we did that work in 1964, we didn't have GPS, we didn't have handheld devices, we didn't have mapping systems in our palm, we didn't have the ability to message the drivers, so I could have told you that that's the future, but it would have taken almost 50 years for that future to happen, not because I was wrong, but because all these other things had to line up. So when I had the audacity to call my talk The Future of the Future, is I want to talk to you about the future being something I can tell you about, and I like to say, and it's going to sound very arrogant, I'm always right. I just get the timing wrong. I never get the timing right because all these other things have to happen, or they're regulatory issues or they're social issues. So the future is a very funny thing. I want to say one last thing about myself, and it's a belief. And it's a belief system that very few people share. That doesn't mean you should share it, but at least I want to come clean with my belief. And my belief is you do not have to measure. You do not have to measure the impact of what you do. And foundations and big organizations say we're measurement-based. If somebody says to me they're measurement-based, that says to me they're small. You don't have to measure impacts. You want to make impacts that are so big they're self-evident. And if they're so small you have to measure that only 2% happened or 1%, the problem is not worth tackling that way. Let other people do the just noticeable difference. Do things that are self-evident and big. So now let me go through three topics. You can discount some of what I said because I think I've exposed my style of thinking, I am probably the closest to being a Bernie Sanders on the stage. Maybe I'm not as avuncular, but I believe many things he does. I'm puzzled by countries at a meta level. This is meta countries. The sizing of countries, it's very strange. If you were to plan the world, let's say this meeting had a workshop, and somebody in the workshop said, let's replan the world, let's redistrict the world. You wouldn't come up with a taxonomy that had the smallest element have, let's say, 1,000 people, and the biggest one, 1.2 billion people. You probably wouldn't come out with something that had 200 or 195 countries. You would come out looking at size as having some meaning, not just a consequence, a random cut or a river or some historical event. Because countries are a real story about bits and atoms. Countries have atoms in the sense that you can actually walk around the edge of a country. I think you would design a world that had maybe 5,000 countries, because there's some sizes that work better than others. Another thing about countries, exceptionalism is a polite word for nationalism. It's a funny phenomenon. I am 100% Greek. My parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my great-great-great-grandparents. And I have to tell you with authority and presence, I was there during the recent elections and during the summer and all of that catastrophe. Greeks think they are exceptional. It's where democracy was born. Nobody forgets it. In fact, democracy being born in Greece has been a problem for Greece because they can't get over it. They can't make something else. And they're stuck in exceptionalism. And if you look at the polls in the United States now and the speeches and the people, I won't bore you. It's the greatest country, the bleeding rubbish. We are like everybody else. Everybody is like everybody else. There is not some group of people who are exceptional. Certainly not nationalistically exceptional. It doesn't exist. Or racially exceptional. It's a disease. And it's a disease that's leaked into the concept of countries, and you'll see why I'm talking about it, which is this reason. Global civics is weak. It's much too weak. I love the United Nations, but it's not a governance. It's not good enough for us to say, let's be one world. Let's be multiple countries, maybe 5,000, and one global civics. Global civics, these sound obvious, maybe naive, but please ask them. Don't take for granted that the world is composed of countries, and the ones we've got is the right number and the right ones. I'm usually invited to give these talks because I'm going to say controversial things. So I won't let you down. Fasten your seatbelts, and you don't have to agree. When I wake up in the morning, I ask myself one question, literally every morning. And since I've said this so often, I actually do. I say, oh, it's time to ask that question. And the question is, will normal market forces do what I am doing today? And if the answer is yes, stop. Nicholas, stop. Because if normal market forces will do it, let them do it. What will normal market forces not do? And there are many things normal market forces will not do. One of the biggest, of course, is things that are out in time. If the payoff is way out, normal market forces won't do it. In the United States, we have an assumption, which is on the screen, that capitalism is democracy. I'm making no plea for democracy. Premature democracies have been a real problem, and I'm also not convinced it's always the right way. But I do think capitalism has hurt those who believe that democracy is a core element. And when I say capitalism is not democracy, to the United States Congress, I've had people who've come to me and said, "Why are you so unpatriotic?" I said, "What? Don't you understand that there are things that aren't part of the business, the commerce community, that mission and market are separate? You're welcome to think of something as a market, but missions may or may not have markets. Their markets, if that's the right word, may be way off, and there's certain self-evidences that you do not because it's a market, but because it's a civic responsibility. And civic responsibilities are close, in many cases, to human rights. Not always, but civic responsibilities, there are some we take for granted. The streetlights. The streetlights are enjoyed by the rich and poor in every country. The streetlights don't appear on your bill. You don't pay more if you're more of a pedestrian. You don't pay more if you're rich or if you're poor. You don't even know how they're being paid. You do, you're one of the few groups that do, but most people don't. It's a bigger economic picture. Society has been lifted through education. They're well employed. They're part of an economic cycle. And guess what? People pay taxes. Nothing wrong with taxes. And those taxes go to make the road, to do the lights, and so on and so forth. And it is profit-making companies that erect the lights, repair the lights, put in the lights, make the bulbs for the lights, build the roads, repair the roads, plow the roads. So it's not an anti-commercial point of view. It's a point of view is that certain things are part of civic responsibility. And my favorite is education. I like education, and I'm going to stick kindergarten through 12th grade. Many countries do much better than the United States. But in the United States, and I'll use it because I know it a bit better, the worst thing that has happened to public education in the United States is private education. Because we've sucked people out of the education system, people who might have cared, might have been able to think about it in a different plane, that might have participated to make public education good. And they're gone. Yes, they pay taxes. Yes, they actually pay double, because if you live in a city, and as some of you might know, and this is truly pathetic, and that is that the United States pays for its school through real estate taxes. Now, that's screwy, but not the subject of this talk. So somebody who pays real estate taxes, typically half of it, will go to a public education system, but their child is going to a private education system, so even though they're paying $50,000 a year for their child to go to private school, they're actually paying $100,000 a year for their child to go to public school, and they pay that, and it doesn't help the public school system. Some of you might know that there's a test called the PISA test. The PISA test Whatever you think about it, it's a test that says something, and the United States, it measures OECD countries and where they are in relationship to each other. The United States is always down below the 50% mark, and Sweden is always either way on the top or near the top or a real outlier. And people look at Sweden, they K through 12, they have no testing, no homework, shortest days per year, and shortest hours per day. And you say, why? What's wrong? We think that the way to make education better is to make longer hours, give more homework, have lots of testing, and they don't do any of that. You know why it's so good? There's no competition. The kids are collaborating. Something for you to think about, because this is a whole separate speech. One of the biggest ills in our society is competition. I sat in a meeting hosted by somebody from the State Department about global communications, and she said, the only thing we know is that it's going to be competition. Why? You don't build two road systems. It's a very complicated subject, so I'll go on to my last. This is I just showed these because they're great slides. This is when I did work in trying to make education for kids in remote areas. I don't have enough time to go to it in detail. It was called One Laptop Per Child. One Laptop Per Child was a very controversial program. We distributed 3 or 4 million laptops, but that wasn't the success. The success of One Laptop Per Child was that I could go to a country, I'll pick Brazil, and I could say to Brazil, I could say to, the time of this, it was Lula, I could say to Lula, put a bid out, because you have to, these are tenders, put a bid for one laptop per child, and I will bid $165 per child. And I promise you, President Lula, I can do it. I can do millions of them for $169 or whatever dollars. So he puts out the tender. We announce we're going to bid this. What does everybody else have to do? They have to come lower. We don't care about it being our computer, so they come lower. So the importance of one laptop per child is that there are 50 to 100 million kids in this world who have their own laptops who would not have had them through bidding, not through making. So let me end with my favorite topic. I'm not hung up on the word human right or human rights, call it civic responsibility. That's the provocative part of this slide is the first word, not the last two words. Now, I believe it's time to rethink certain things, and I'm going to make a very specific proposal. Why did the internet not unify the world? I thought it was. If you had invited me here 20 years ago, I would have said, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to see a phenomenon that is going to help unify the world in a way it has never done before. And it's called the internet. And it hasn't done so. Now, there are many reasons, and probably those reasons will be topics of other discussions, but one of my reasons, which I think is an important one, is really taken from a phrase. Somebody said, the future is coming, but it won't be evenly distributed. And the internet certainly wasn't. We looked at the private sector to do it, and the private sector did many things well, but not the internet. So I think the internet should be free. I know how to do it, and I think you should want it. It should be free the same way streetlights are free. It should be free the same way public schools are free. It should be free the same way libraries are free. It can be, and I think it must be. So here's how I plan to do it, and I will use 2 minutes to tell you. I'll go back to the word free for a second. It turns out that the 196 countries we have get in the way, because each has a different regulatory regime, each thinks differently about pricing, each thinks differently about content. I mean, there's a lot of different thinking. And I will argue that if we launch low Earth orbiting satellites, roughly 500, 600 miles up, thousands of them, it would cost $10 billion to connect everybody in the world, including operating those satellites for 10 years. Now, why do I like that scheme? And before I say too much, I do know that's sort of half the equation, but I like this scheme because it's above 100 miles. The jurisdiction of countries stops. You're out of the jurisdiction. So you're orbiting outside the jurisdiction of nations, and LEOs, low Earth orbiting satellites, are just going around and around. They cover the complete Earth, every square inch. And if I can tell you every square inch has 10 megabits, you don't have to give anybody landing rights, but those 10 square inches, or this room has the 10 megabits, I don't care if you give them landing rights. I'll do it all over the world, equally distributed. I won't focus on cities, just the geometry lends itself for that. And what will I do? I'll create, this is a little harder, this turns out to be the hardest part, a new entity in the United Nations called the World Communications Organization, who will launch it and run it, and the $10 billion is lunch money. It's 5 days of American presence in Afghanistan. So this is affordable. And just to make one last note about WCO, more than most audiences, and there are probably people from the UN in the audience, in the UN, if you look at food, there's the World Food Program and the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization. One does information and research and so on, and the other is combatants, really, land troops. They feed 50 million people a day. They drive trucks. They get killed. They're on the ground. In telecommunications, we have the FAO. It's called the ITU. We don't have a World Food Program for telecommunications, and we need it badly now. Thank you very much.